Howdy there. It's late April, early May of 2020 as I'm doing this video, and it's the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. So before I start, I'd just like to say that I hope everybody is successfully navigating the crisis. In my case, my niece's daughter works in healthcare in Massachusetts, and there's not a day goes by that I don't worry about and think about how she's going to stay safe through this. So hats off to everybody who works in healthcare and actually everybody who's working any job right now. It's my wish for all of us that by the end of the year things are looking a lot better. April 30, 2020 is the 50th anniversary of Inger Stevens passing. So I wanted to mark that occasion, and I also wanted to talk a lot about Jerry Lim. Jerry was the curator of the Inger Stevens Memorial website for a number of years, and he did an absolutely exemplary job. So I wanted to talk about that some and also talk about how I came to upload the videos that I did about Inger Stevens on YouTube. So as to why pick Inger Stevens, actually I've always been somebody who was always interested in biographies. I used to read a lot of biographies when I was a kid, usually historical figures, but as to why Jerry Lim and I were standing for Inger Stevens, if you don't know what standing means, if you're a baby boomer, just Google it like I did. Basically means obsessive fan, but in Jerry's case, he came by it more honestly than I did. Jerry was friends with William T. Patterson, who wrote this book, The Farmer's Daughter Remembered. As far as I know, it's the only biography there is of Inger Stevens. It's a few days ago, it was still available on Amazon. It's probably available other places. And no, I don't have any connection with the Patterson family or the publishing of the book. I don't get any money for that. It's just the only biography out there that I know of. And it was one of the things that piqued my interest and triggered me into uploading my videos about Inger. Jerry was friends with Bill. I'm not sure how they met. Bill credits Jerry in the front of the book with helping him with the book. So Jerry and Bill were friends. Like I say, I'm not sure how they met. Jerry was a pharmacist in Los Angeles. He was also quite active in martial arts. Jerry's dad, for lack of a better term, was one of the pioneers of Kung Fu in Los Angeles. That is something that Jerry continued all of his life, and he was quite active up until his death in 2017. He was very active in the martial arts community there. So it's funny the way that the threads of life bring people together eventually. Jerry and I were roughly the same age, a little bit 2 years older than he was, I guess, but we grew up in the same time frame. His dad was a World War II vet, as was mine. My dad was a B-17 pilot in World War II. He got out of the service at Walker Air Force Base in Roswell, so that's where I grew up. Jerry grew up in L.A. I have to think it must have been pretty special for him, you know, a Chinese American guy, and he's learning Chinese martial arts at the same time that Bruce Lee is becoming famous in TV and movies. It must have been kind of a point of pride for him. He never said that, but it had to be something that he was quite aware of, I would think. So Jerry, I guess you could say Jerry grew up in LA with Hollywood stuff nearby, and I grew up in Roswell with UFO stuff nearby. I know at one point Jerry and I were in a restaurant in LA talking about the TV shows that we watched as kids, and of course we both had seen Inger as kids. And we were just naming off TV shows, and at one point we both almost blurted out in unison "The Cat," which you'd have to be a boomer to remember that show. But we kind of had the same similar tastes and our minds kind of work the same. I myself was never much interested in Hollywood as a kid, as a little kid. I remember when Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, I remember the commotion in the press, but I never got at all what those actresses like her were about when I was a kid. I was interested in astronauts and jet planes and race cars. So when I would see the blonde bombshell thing, it was like, why do they act like that? I never got what that was about. However, a couple of years after Marilyn died, I must have been watching the ABC Sunday Night movie or something like that, and The Misfits was on. And I started watching it probably because Clark Gable was in it. But by the end of the movie, my perception of Marilyn had completely changed. In the movie, she portrays a great empathy with animals, which is something I share with her. And by the end of the movie, I thought, she's a pretty cool girl. So I never thought of her the same way again after that movie. One of my videos is a dual tribute to both Inger and Marilyn. I also remember Inger Stevens' death in 1970. I was living in Massachusetts, about 17 years old at the time. And in the 8 years that transpired between 62 and 70, the psychology of the country had changed. We were a lot more jaded in 1970 than we were in 62, but nevertheless, I still remember again the commotion in the press about Inger's death. And of course, I had always liked Inger. When I was a little kid, the first impression that she made on me was the happy, cheerful lady, because she was always upbeat and energetic and had this fantastic smile. So that's the way I always remembered her. So when her death occurred, I was shocked. And I guess the last movie that I had seen before Inger died was Hang 'em High with Clint Eastwood, and she does a scene in that movie where she's telling Clint Eastwood's character about having been raped and her husband being killed when they were attacked by outlaws. And she did a really great job of acting in that scene. But the press, I can't remember how they reported Inger's death, whether it was a drug overdose, or I don't know if they actually used the word suicide or not, but incorrectly, my 17-year-old mind conflated the two. It was like, well, she must have been deeply troubled because I was remembering the way she was acting in that scene. But of course, in real life, those two things aren't necessarily related. I mean, she was playing a scene in the movie, obviously, so it didn't necessarily translate directly into real life. But it would be really decades later before I really was ever interested enough in Hollywood and actors to read biographies about them. So a lot of years would pass before I would delve into the lives of Inger or Marilyn. So a lot of years passed between Inger's death and the time that I started uploading my videos to YouTube. And at some point, and I don't know when and I don't know how, but Jerry and Bill Patterson became friends, and Jerry helped Bill with the book. I don't know if they met through Jerry's capacity as a pharmacist or something to do with martial arts. I just don't know. In Bill Patterson's book, Bill mentions somebody that went by the name of Fenelon. This gentleman has a long Latin name that if I tried to pronounce it, I would hideously mangle it. I will try to put it across the bottom of the screen when I edit this. But Fenelon started the Inger Stevens Memorial website, and Jerry at some point took it over, possibly because Bill knew Fenelon and maybe Bill recommended Jerry to take it over. I don't know. But just at some point, Jerry did take it over. Jerry, if you were a celebrity and passed away and somebody that you didn't know happened to fall into taking over your legacy, Jerry Lim was absolutely the best person you could ever wish for to do that. I visited Jerry's website a number of times, and the thing that I always took away from it was that he was so disciplined and so respectful and so classy in the way that he dealt with her and her life and her family, and he was just exemplary in every way he conducted himself with that website. Jerry was a very good writer, and maybe some of Bill Patterson's private investigator wore off on Jerry, I don't know. Jerry was very good at tracking down materials that were related to Inger's life, whether it was a video or a recording of her singing or pictures. He was just very good at finding those materials, and of course he would then incorporate them into his website. Jerry also would go to the fan events around Hollywood and interview the people, the stars that Inger had worked with. I know I can't remember all of them, but Angie Dickinson, Peter Falk, Franz Nguyen, Don Murray. I don't know if Jerry talked to Don Murray or not. Don starred in Bus Stop with Marilyn and in The Borgia Stick with Inger, but I can't remember if Jerry talked to him or not. But Jerry would talk to these stars and then, of course, go back to his website and incorporate any anecdotes or memories that they had. And he really put a lot of heart and soul into that website. Since Jerry passed away, I have not been able to find that website anymore, which breaks my heart because it was a wealth of all kinds of information about Inger. I haven't been able to find it. I hope that, maybe somebody has resurrected it out there somewhere. That would be great. But I certainly hope it isn't lost forever, because he did so much work on that website, and he was just the epitome of class. And that's what I always took away from my visit to his website. So it was basically a triad of things that inspired me to start uploading my videos on YouTube. One of them was Bill Patterson's book. The other was Jerry's website, of course. And also on YouTube, there is somebody named Marachek, and I don't know them. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. Never met them or communicated with them, but they had uploaded, it must have been like 2007, a video about Inger Stevens. It was called A Little Inger Stevens. It was like a series. It had a little Inger Stevens and a little Deborah Paget, like that. And I remember one time watching that video, and I was the 10,000th, exactly 10,000th view of that video. And at this point, Inger had been gone for 30 some odd years. And it just struck me as cool that long after her death, her video was getting that many hits. And there was a part in Bill Patterson's book where he was talking to somebody, I forget who it was, but he was talking about Inger not having a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And whoever he was talking to said something to the effect, well, Bill, nobody knows who she is. And that kind of stung me a little bit, because I knew it wasn't true. A lot of people my age remembered Inger, and her movies and TV shows are still being seen. In fact, on Netflix, if you look at the Twilight Zone TV series, the thumbnail for it, it's got Rod Serling, but right over his shoulder is Inger Stevens in her role as the hitchhiker. So I knew that people remembered her, but my overall thought was, well, we'll just see if we can't do something to help people remember. So those were the inspirations for the first YouTube videos that I uploaded.